The holographic medical monitors at the Aegis Prime Medical Citadel chimed softly as senior physician Dr. Xylar reviewed the day's arrival charts. Xylar's upper primary tendrils twitched in mild concern as a new file loaded onto his datapad. A human. According to the standard Galactic xenobiology database, humans were categorized as a fragile, soft-skinned species from a mid-tier world, completely lacking natural armor, venom, or energy projection organs. The automated system had flagged the species as high risk, advising medical staff to handle them with extreme care due to their low tolerance for environmental extremes and seemingly delicate physical frames. The file detailed a young human mechanic named Leo, who had just been transported from the lower docking bays following a mechanical structural collapse during a routine core alignment. Xylar sighed through his respiratory vents, adjusting his optical enhancers as he prepared to treat a creature that, by all textbook accounts, could break from a stiff breeze. The Citadel prided itself on treating the galaxy's most elite species, and dealing with an unaugmented biped from a primitive death world was always an exercise in tedious paperwork and fragile containment protocols. When Leo was wheeled into the pristine, sterile white examination room, Dr. Xylar immediately scanned the injury with his primary diagnostic array. The medical beam flashed a bright, warning amber across the chamber, indicating a clean fracture of the left fibula along with significant localized soft tissue trauma. To any civilized species in the Orion arm, a broken bone was an agonizing, system-shocking event that required immediate molecular immobilization, absolute isolation, and heavy neural sedation to prevent the patient's psyche from fracturing due to the sheer pain. Xylar's assistant, a hovering, gel-based being named Bubbles, began nervously prepping a multi-million credit molecular reconstruction pod to stitch the bone back together at the cellular level, humming a low frequency designed to soothe panicked patients. Xylar stepped forward, his multiple digits hovering over a hypospray loaded with heavy sedatives, fully expecting the human to be screaming, thrashing, or unconscious from the severe physical trauma. Instead, the young human was simply staring at the ceiling, idly humming a strange, rhythmic tune that Xylar's translator couldn't identify, seemingly oblivious to the fact that his leg was structurally compromised. Before the automated reconstruction pod could slide into place, Leo did something that caused Dr. Xylar's secondary eyes to widen in complete horror. He sat up abruptly, swung his legs over the edge of the hover gurney, and let out a long, heavy yawn that exposed his flat, oddly non-threatening teeth. He pulled a small, plastic bottle of primitive chemical tablets from his pocket, casually popped 2 into his mouth, and swallowed them dry before tightening a basic, synthetic Velcro brace around his lower leg. "Nah, don't waste the juice on me, Doc," Leo said with a casual wave of his hand, completely ignoring the flashing warning lights of the diagnostic console. "It's just a minor break, barely a hairline fracture if you ask me. I've had worse from falling off a loading dock back home, I'll just walk it off." Xylar froze, his tendrils locking up as his translator frantically tried to make sense of the idiom, finding no logical correlation between a broken load-bearing structure and the act of locomotion. "Walk it off?" Dr. Xylar's vocal translator clicked and whirred, spitting out the literal translation before flagging it as a semantic error. To the absolute bafflement of the entire medical staff, Leo actually stood up, placing his boots firmly onto the polished alloy floor of the examination room. He winced slightly, taking a short, sharp breath through his nose, but immediately leaned his weight onto his good leg and began hobbling toward the waiting area, using the wall for occasional balance. Bubbles expanded to twice his normal volume in sheer panic, his gel turning a vibrant shade of distressed purple, convinced the human's nervous system was experiencing a catastrophic, delayed shock failure. Xylar rushed forward with the sedative hypospray held high, determined to forcibly subdue the patient for his own protection, but Leo simply laughed, nudged the doctor away with an elbow, and claimed he had a shift to finish before the supervisor docked his pay. Before Dr. Xylar could press the override button to lock down the gurney, the bright overhead lights of the medical citadel abruptly shifted to a deep, pulsing crimson. The automated security grid engaged with a heavy, metallic thud that vibrated through the floorboards, sealing the thick blast doors of the ward with a hiss of pneumatic pressure. The main computer's voice echoed flatly through the corridors. Alert. Containment breach. Perimeter breached by external hostile forces. The terminal screen on the wall flickered to life, showing live security footage of Vraxian raiders, heavily armored, cybernetic mercenaries known for their absolute ruthlessness, cutting through the lower vault doors to steal rare medical isotopes. The pacifist alien doctors and patients in the outer lobby immediately began to panic, wailing and retracting their appendages into their protective carapaces as the realization sank in that they were entirely defenseless. The main power grid flickered violently before dying completely, plunging the entire medical ward into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the faint, rhythmic red glow of the emergency floor strips. The peaceful, fragile alien doctors and patients huddled into the furthest corners of the room, trembling and clicking in terror as the heavy thuds of mercenary boots echoed from the hallway. Dr. Xylar's sensors scanned the room for immediate threats, but his attention was repeatedly drawn back to Leo, who had stopped hobbling altogether. The human was standing perfectly still near a darkened observation window, peering out into the corridor with an expression that wasn't fear, but rather an intense, calculating focus. Curiously, the human wasn't shaking like the others, and his breathing, which had been erratic and shallow due to the broken leg, was slowing down into a steady, rhythmic, and incredibly deep pace. Xylar crept closer to Leo, intending to drag the injured human down into a hiding spot before his reckless behavior drew the attention of the raiders outside. However, as he neared, Xylar's handheld medical sensors picked up a bizarre, escalating anomaly inside Leo's biology that made his internal organs turn cold. The human's pupils had dilated completely, absorbing what little light remained in the room, his core temperature was spiking, and a massive surge of an unknown, highly volatile biochemical compound was flooding his bloodstream. Xylar watched in utter disbelief as Leo stood perfectly straight, placing full, even weight on his fractured leg without a single flinch or groan of pain. The pain signature on the medical monitor had completely flattened out to zero, replaced by a terrifying surge of neural activity that Xylar had only ever seen in apex predators on the hunt. The heavy blast doors of the medical ward groaned under immense pressure as a high-powered plasma torch began sparks flying through the locking mechanism. The door hissed open, pooling white-hot metal onto the floor, and 3 large, cybernetic Vraxian raiders stepped into the room, their heavy kinetic weapons raised and scanning for resistance. The lead raider let out a grating, synthesized laugh, mocking the defenseless alien medical staff huddled on the floor, demanding they point the way to the vault keys. The mercenary stepped directly toward Dr. Xylar, leveling a heavy, glowing blaster at the physician's primary neural cluster to enforce compliance. Xylar closed his eyes, his tendrils wrapping tightly around his core as he prepared for the end, fully expecting the fragile, injured human nearby to be the first to collapse under the sheer terrifying pressure. Instead of collapsing, Leo moved with a terrifying velocity that the alien medical sensors could barely track in the dim red light. With the evolutionary override of adrenaline coursing through his veins, the human ignored the broken bone entirely, converting his pain into raw, unadulterated kinetic force. Moving with explosive speed that defied his soft, unarmored exterior, Leo gripped the edge of a heavy, unpowered metallic diagnostic console that was bolted to the floor. With a loud, guttural roar, his muscles strained, ripping the heavy machinery entirely free from its alloy mountings, and he swung it forward like a primitive club. The massive impact sent the lead raider crashing across the corridor, his cybernetics sparking wildly as Leo closed the distance, utilizing raw, survival-driven momentum to completely disarm and single-handedly incapacitate the remaining mercenaries before they could even pull their triggers. 10 minutes later, the Citadel's primary security forces finally arrived to find the heavily armored raiders neatly tied up with medical tubing, and Leo sitting calmly on a bench, holding a bag of frozen synthetic gel against his swelling leg. "Man, that's gonna hurt like crazy tomorrow," Leo muttered, flashing a tired but satisfied grin as his heart rate finally began to normalize. Dr. Xylar, still trembling from the display of raw violence, immediately bypassed the standard medical logs and sent an urgent, high-priority encrypted report to the Galactic Medical Council. By the next standard morning, an official, unalterable bronze plaque was permanently bolted to the entrance of every hospital in the sector. Directive 904. Human patients are strictly prohibited from walking it off. If a human claims they're fine while suffering from structural damage, sedate them immediately for the safety of the facility. Make sure to like and subscribe.